Guitar playing champions, in this tutorial on adding vibrato to string bends, you'll learn probably the most expressive technique on guitar. Now, string bends sound great, vibrato sounds great, but combining them together by integrating these two techniques at the same time is one of the coolest things ever. So, if you want to learn how to make your guitar sing, cry, or scream, this is the tutorial for you. Hi, I'm Tom Hess, and when I first learned how to add vibrato to string bends, everything changed. My playing immediately sounded better, more expressive, and playing guitar became a lot more fun. But I'll admit, it was really hard for me to master this technique. I knew how to bend strings, and I knew how to play and use vibrato, but combining them together was not easy for me to learn. But once I finally understood why I was struggling and made some important changes to how I practiced bent note vibrato, it soon all came together, and I've been much happier ever since as a guitar player. Now, I've taught the same stuff to thousands of my private guitar students over the last 30 plus years, and they're a lot happier now too. So today, it's your turn. So grab your guitar and let's have some fun. All right, so the first thing that I'll tell you is, before trying to learn bent note vibrato, you've got to really master, or at least be pretty good at, two other techniques. First, you've got to be able to bend notes in tune. So when you do string bends, make sure that when you do them, you know that they're in tune. Because if the string bend itself is not in tune, when adding vibrato on top of that, that will never be in tune. Okay, so string bends in tune, this is priority number one. Got to have this down first. Okay, you don't have to be super great at bending strings, but you at least have to be certain that when you bend a string, it's in tune. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is to learn the basics of vibrato, not on bent notes, but just normal unbent notes, just normal notes. Okay, so what you're looking for here is, as you bend the string to do vibrato, that the peaks and the valleys of how far the string is being bent and then released is consistently the same. Okay, now why do we want it to be consistent, the same height and depth? Because if it's not consistent, it will sound like you don't have control over the guitar, and the note will sound like it's out of tune. It would just sound kind of crazy, okay? And not like in a cool way, okay? In a not cool way. All right, so we want to master the basics of vibrato first. You don't have to be a super master at vibrato, but you at least have to get to the point where when you're doing the vibrato, the string is being bent the same amount and then released all the way back down to zero. Zero meaning an unbent note, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about where the movement comes from. Okay, when I'm doing vibrato or string bends, I do not use my fingers to push the strings. I'm not doing anything like this, okay? In fact, my fingers don't move at all. Okay, if you notice, my fingers are basically locked in place. So once I decide, let's say I'm going to bend this note right here. Once I decide that I'm going to do this with vibrato, let's say I just do it with one finger, in this case, this arc of this finger never moves, okay, once it's in place to do the vibrato. It might move when I'm playing a scale or a lick or whatever, but once it's time to do the vibrato, that finger doesn't move at all. It's inflexible on purpose, okay? Now, it's not tense. You don't want to tense it up, because if you tense it up too much, then it will be really hard to get out of that note and go on to play whatever the next notes are. You want to, you don't want to have built up tension in your hand or in your fingers when you leave the note with vibrato to go play other things, because that will make what comes next harder to play, and we don't want that. We want it to be easier, right? But we want the finger to be stable. It doesn't move, okay? So this part of my hand right here, right where this knuckle is, if we make a fist right here, this is on the guitar, okay? And it's going to move kind of like this, like a fulcrum point, okay? So this is like a pivot point. You can think of it like a hinge on a door, okay? So that's how that's going to work. Now, I'm not really turning my wrist. I'm not doing this with my fingers. All I'm doing is I'm turning my arm, okay? So imagine you've got a doorknob, Okay, imagine this is the doorknob, and you just want to turn the doorknob. Okay, you use your arm. The fingers don't move. I mean, relative to your hand, they don't move. Okay, your wrist doesn't like do this or anything. Okay, it's basically just in place, and then you use the arm to turn the doorknob. That's the same motion that I use to bend strings. Okay, so watch here. This is all stiff. Nothing's moving here. Watch this. Okay, you can see way down here, this is where the motion is coming from. Same thing with vibrato. You can watch now right here, this part of my arm right here. Okay, the finger's not moving, the wrist isn't doing anything like that. I'm just doing this. From the arm. Okay, so the arm does the work. Whether you're bending the string down towards the floor, then your arm is torquing over this way. Or if you're bending up towards the ceiling, then your arm is torquing over this way. Okay, but the motion comes from the arm. Now listen, if you do vibrato a different way, you have a different technique, great. You do it the way you want to do it. That's fine. But if you're taking lessons from me, I'm going to definitely teach you to do this from the arm because you're going to get way more power with very little effort because you're going to use the weight of the arm and all this leverage to torque over the string. That's going to make it so much easier. You'll be able to do really huge string bends. If you want to bend up 2 steps or 2.5 steps, even 3 steps, you can do that by torquing your arm. Try doing that like this. Not impossible, but it's really hard, okay? So you want the motion to come from the arm. All right, now before we go any further, I've got another video on YouTube that goes into way more detail on how to master the basic vibrato technique. So the things I was just talking about is included in this other video, but there's other steps that we don't have time for in this video because we're mainly focusing on bent note vibrato for the rest of this video. So if you still need help on the basics of vibrato, check out my other video on YouTube called Vibrato Guitar Lesson 10-Step How-To Guide. You definitely want to check that out. Now, at this point, I'm assuming you've either left and went and checked that video out and come back, or you already got vibrato, you have no problem with that, and you just need help with adding vibrato to bend strings. Okay, cool. So if that's the case, then the next piece of advice I have for you is this. Stop giving up on the note. Okay, so when I'm teaching students, very often, what will happen is they'll bend a string, okay? The string is now bent, it's in the air, and they'll start, doing vibrato, and maybe they do like 2 or 3 little pulses of the vibrato, and then they stop. I don't know why they stop, but they stop. They're like, okay, I'm done. And then they start again, and then they stop, and then they do it again. And every time, they'll bend the string, and they stop in between. Okay, that's a huge mistake. Okay, so if you are doing that, please don't do that. Okay, it will be easier for you to master if you do not give up on the note. What does that mean? It means that once you hit the string, okay, and then you're bending it, and you apply the vibrato, even if the string is kind of dying and you can hear it a little bit there out of the amp, but even if the string is mostly dead, that's okay. Why is it okay? Because we're not playing a song right now. We're practicing, okay? So if you're playing a song and you're playing a solo in a song and the note starts to die out, okay, then maybe you want to hit the string again to keep the note alive or whatever. But for the purpose of practicing the bent note vibrato, don't stop doing the vibrato, okay? Don't stop and then hit the string again. Stop. Don't do that. What we're trying to do is just master the movement, okay, with the vibrato on the string bend, and we're trying to master listening to make sure that the note and the vibrato is in tune so that it's being bent up to the same place and released all the way back down to the same place. And it's consistent. The peaks and the valleys of the bent note vibrato are consistent. That is the most important thing. It's less important how wide the vibrato is, how fast the vibrato is. You can deal with all that stuff later. It's less important if you got noise or string noise, where you hear the fret grinding, the string grinding against the fret, or some of the other strings are making noise. Listen, we can clean all that up later. It's not important right now. The priority is master the motion, okay? Nothing else matters. At this point, nothing else matters. Okay, once you've mastered the motion, then, and you know that the vibrato is in tune, okay, and you got it pretty consistent. Once that is done, then we can worry about, gee, how are we going to keep the other strings quiet? Or what should the speed of the vibrato be? How much should I be bending the string every time I do the pulses for the vibrato? All that comes later, okay? But too often people want to bring those elements in and try to work on them or figure stuff out when they don't have mastery of the motions. If you're doing that, you're wasting time, okay? And I don't want you to waste time. I'm trying to help you to make this go faster so that you can master it sooner and not waste, hundreds of wasted practice hours because we got the order wrong. And this is a really crucial thing that I work with my students all the time. The order in which you do things, the order in which you practice things is crucial. It's just as important, and in some cases, even more important than what you're actually practicing. The order matters a lot. This is why, if you're taking lessons from someone, you want to make sure that that teacher is not just a great player. We don't really care how great of a player he is, but is a great teacher. And if you're teaching yourself, it's going to be really hard trying to get that order right if you're watching random videos on YouTube or wherever else. Okay, so the order, listen, if you want to be a great player and you don't want to take your whole life to get there, the order is going to matter a lot. Now, let me ask you a question. Doesn't it drive you crazy when the songs or the solos or the exercises that you play on guitar sound really good one day, but then maybe the next day or a week later, it doesn't sound as good? Now, we've all had this problem. I've had this problem. I'm sure you've had this problem. Everyone's had this problem, okay? It's super frustrating when you can't rely on your guitar skills to be consistent and dependable in every playing situation. So, for example, when you're trying to record yourself, or maybe you're jamming with your friends, or other people are watching you play, it's in those situations when you really need, or at least want, your playing to be at its best. But that's precisely the type of situations where the playing tends to fall apart a bit, and you may not be able to show people what you can really do on your best days. Well, fortunately, it's simple now to solve this problem by training the consistency of your guitar playing, which is very different than practicing to master something. Okay, when you're learning and trying to master something, that's one thing. But consistency, it's a whole different set of guitar practice strategies and training. It's very different, okay? Now, there are little known but proven effective guitar practice strategies that you can use so that when you play guitar, it sounds like you're playing on your best days, not your worst days, okay? We want to close the gap between when you play your best and when you're not playing. So we want to close this gap so that's more consistent, so that you're able to play guitar accurately on all days, not just when things all fall in line, okay? So download my new free, it's totally free, guys. Download my new free guide to playing guitar accurately, consistently, and reliably, even on your worst days. Click on the link below to download your copy right now. You will be very glad that you did.